today? Good? Friday. My name is Rachel. I teach illustration here at Webster. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for coming out today, spending your Friday here with us, and supporting the arts. I'd like to mention that the DADAH Friday Noon Lecture Series and workshops are made possible with support from our Regional Arts Commission Program Support Grant. So thank you, RAC. Igor Karash is an award-winning illustrator who has worked in multiple disciplines, from book illustration and graphic novels to theater scenic design. Igor's client list includes Folio Society in London, Top Shelf Productions, IDW Publishers, Easton Press, and Centipede Press, among others. Igor's illustrator profile is part of the TASCHEN's the Illustrator 100 Best Illustrations from Around the Globe edition, and he's been recognized by numerous prestigious illustration and design competitions, including Luerzer's Archive in Vienna, American Illustration, Society of Illustrators in New York, as well as the 3x3 magazine, and Graphis. This year, Igor's series of illustrations for the Slaughterhouse Five by Kurt Vonnegut received a silver medal from the Society of Illustrators in New York and a gold award in the book category by the 3x3 magazine of contemporary illustration. Please join me in welcoming our very own Igor Karash.
Thank you, Rachel, for this wonderful introduction. And I have to mention before we start that my collaboration with DADAH, the moment when I found my second home here started with this kind of presentation I did almost 10 years ago now. All right, so what we should start. So instead of, my first presentation here was about, talking about 30 years of my practice, and this time I decided just focus on one project, which is unfortunately became so relevant to our times, of so many wars invading in different parts of the world. I'll talk about it. But basically we'll talk about this deluxe edition done by Easton Press in Connecticut that I designed and illustrated. And there's a couple of prints you can take a look at later. But book involved more than 40 illustrations of different caliber. And what if we go through the presentation and I'll make some comments. So as you know, probably many of you know, Slaughterhouse Five is one of the satirical horrors, I would say, where some pages, make you hysterically laugh. And it is about, one event that took place in February 15, 1945, where the whole entire city was basically destroyed by in the end of the war. And there's a lot of moral and ethical, philosophical, historical discussions about was it even needed to do that. And while I was working on this book, I was watching a lot of these discussions and documentaries, and still in my mind it's still it's balancing on some kind of an unanswered question. And but I'm not really well equipped for having this whole deep historical review of the. But in short, basically the book is about a person named Billy Pilgrim. And important to say that Kurt Vonnegut, American author, second Mark Twain, I would say, he was once American soldier and fought in World War II, and basically ended up to be prisoner of war, and found his last moments of the war were in Dresden, and the only thing that saved his life that they were stationed in the old warehouse, Slaughterhouse, actually. And book begins from points Kurt Vonnegut makes. I mean, this is really interesting book, sort of unique, where fiction and biographical parts, they all intervene and they go into parallel to three ways, directions, into four dimensions, because it's all about traveling in time and psychological difficulties. Everybody who coming from the war having with diagnosis of so I was approached by publishers in end of 2021, and it was like 2 months before Russian aggression into Ukraine, and basically things didn't look really promising and good, but who would really think that Putin will go in? And so I started my process as usual. I read this book in Russian back in my previous life, when I was a young man, and I really liked the book, but definitely by the age of 60 when I was, not that I forgot about it, but a lot of things slip from my memory. So I started kind of definitely reading the book, then watched a lot of kind of visuals and all the documentaries about the war, and what I usually, this presentation really will be more focused on my process. So I started to develop basically three basic concepts: how I would, as illustrator, as a reader, would kind of create some kind of thing, some kind of experience for reader. And usually I'm giving publishers few kind of concepts to pick from. So one was named Newest Testament, because basically in the book, when Billy Pilgrim, he is as a prisoner of war, soldier, but he's also travels in time to a utopian planet called Tralfamador. So Tralfamadorians, they're giving him, almost like 10 commandments, but it's new commandments. So I started to think about these kind of things through prism of which I would maybe translate, certain, things in the book into visuals. And usually I'm kind of start to search art that associated with some kind of idea I had in early stages. And I started to look for Newest Testament. I started to look at art where things are looking really strange, like that UFO flying in the sky and presented by medieval painters, and all these flying objects, and basically things where this outer science fiction could meet biblical world. And that basically set of images was presented to client. And then I started to look into my personal art, where I was using some kind of mimicry of religious painting, I would say, or sometimes. So basically, the idea behind this was because Billy Pilgrim travels through time, and Tralfamadorians see life of human not as we see it. It's a multiple images, kind of starting from first moment of the birth till the very end of the death. So I started to kind of imagine, what if I make the composition of each illustration having some kind of one central image, and everything around it is, so this was sort of like first initial sketches, kind of think of organization of the visuals, and sort of like everybody saw probably a lot of religious paintings where things showing the whole life of saint in multiple images. So that way I was kind of planning to show Billy Pilgrim's moments in his life and death surrounding one particular image that illustrates certain moment in the book. So, and then I imagine some kind of maybe old organ in the church to be something, place where soldiers are going through as a guillotine. So, it's all kind of really quick sketches, and that basically was something. And I told publishers that basically each, even my sketches are very brief, so each painting could be done in a very delicate and very kind of almost like old master kind of thing. So this is some of my paintings where I was imagining myself this painter. So then the second project, second concept was named So It Goes. And So It Goes is phrased from the book. And basically almost every paragraph ends with phrase by Kurt Vonnegut, So It Goes. And So It goes after every event of death or some kind of tragic event. But this book is filled with death and devastation and tragedy, but it's also very funny. And I really recommend you to read if you never read that. And So It Goes I started to imagine in a different format. And that, there's a lot happening in the book. It's just one of the kind where there's a line and several lines in the book where Billy is watching after, a long time, huge, after the war, definitely, he watches a lot of wartime documentary. And as I do, by the way, and we have a household joke that, what's Igor and Nelson doing today? And everybody, yeah, they're watching war documentary. And Nelson is my dog. So, and I started to kind of pull a lot of images and things because I love this. I don't know why, but I'm kind of attracted to this war stories, war documentaries. And also this image here is from my personal series about commemorating 100 years from Russian Revolution of 2017. It was all done is black and white and had this kind of film grain in it. Even Russian Revolution not associating in my mind with film necessarily, not a lot of photography film was done. But this is sort of like a different fragments of different pieces. I started thinking about concepts, So It Goes done in similar manner. And again, because this whole scientific fiction involved in this book, and from Hondurans, they see the world in multiple images, and I started to imagine each print, each image being done in several translucent pieces of film, and I knew, like, Easton Press is kind of famous for the deluxe editions, and thought, well, maybe they would be able to afford something like that. So I was kind of showing these to them as a prototype for a method of how illustration could be done, where part of the image could be taken from one layer and then appears on second layer of illustration. So altogether they'll appear as an entire image, and then people can see separate parts of it. And then third concept was theater of war, where again, everything what comes from humorous part of this book and art of propaganda, and you imagine that time, every war is going on 3 different levels. It's war on field, theater war on the ground, and then informational war and psychological war, which part of the German bombing was in fact psychological affection and population to break and break the will of army and people to fight. In here, I wanted to kind of show them this craziness of informational war that comes out of propaganda and some video production. You would be laughing that, you know, in military there's a lot of sort of like, it's not like really cultural things going on, but there is some theater and orchestras and some kind of self-initiated things because soldiers need some entertainment. So, and part of it is also part of the book. I would say a little later that, you know, Kurt Vonnegut called Peter Pilgrim Cinderella. And I'll talk about it, I'll show you the image about that. But Cinderella comes from the play, from the book, and I found image where soldiers during World War I were staging something that I would, in my mind, kind of coincides with Cinderella play or some maybe other play. And also in this concept, I was thinking about these early days of sci-fi, of 40s, 50s, of the books were published in America and everywhere in the world with all these kind of interesting images. And I wanted to also look in my own kind of art history and see what kind of theater productions and things related to time travel, to like different layers of people being in different places. For example, this early work of mine, I call it Immigrant. Even before I was thinking about immigrating, I did that image, I don't know why, something was inside of my brain. I call it Immigrant, and for me it was a little bit, you know, kind of segmentation of all Jewish world, somewhere in Russia, Poland, and America, in my mind. And then some kind of stage designs was also like a lot of grotesque and craziness going on. And you know, a lot of these kind of things where body, soul, environment lives in different places and all segmented. So I was thinking this, and then I made this kind of painted illustrations, something that to show Klein how these two words really, as Cinderella somewhere in Dresden, and really, actually, by the way, on that Transformador planet, he was living in the zoo, Transformadorian zoo, and he was absolutely naked, and that's I portrayed him. He had a toilet seat. They supplied everything what he knew from normal life. He had a little sofa, a little chair, toilet seat, everything, and Transformadorians were able to kind of look at him at any point where they wanted. So, and then when I'm done with, you know, basically I send them all these presentations with 3 concepts, and they choose the one that called So It Goes, which I was happy that they chose one, this, you know, that black and white theme. And then after that, by the way, I have to tell about this. I had before a lot of great clients. This client, they gave me absolute freedom with everything I wanted to do. I didn't know that, and I was really, really kind of, not nervous, but you know, was going to by high standards how to behave and what to do, send them a lot of notes, a lot of sketches, and then soon I realized it's like, oh, you just do whatever. We're happy with this So It Goes platform idea. So I started art development, and as always, as I do, you know, I'm kind of started thinking about book as not only something that is cover as a separate thing, and then other elements as a separate thing. I kind of starting to think about it as a concept, as an object that where all elements should coincide and create interesting experience. So I started to think about typography and about illustration that could come together, hopefully. So, and I did, I also kind of have to tell you that typical Easton Press production is beautifully created books, but they're very, they see it in a very traditional way how people engage with books, how people think about illustrated classics. And what I start, basically what we got in the end, because I couldn't imagine this book were done in this kind of fashion, with leaves and this kind of thing. I felt like this is not Kurt Vonnegut. And on our first meeting, I told them that, and they said, we were thinking about it. What if we try to do something that for the society sometimes does that's very different from usual classic book. So we started there, and this is all what came as a fruition. But and this is sort of a couple of slides to show you the whole scale of the project. So, and on the top there, my first sketches for the cover, and then I kind of created this kind of schematic plan. And then when images were ready, I started to put a few things in. So, but this is just to give you, but the starting point was, in some way similar to what you see as a final product, but I had to start somewhere, and I should say for an illustrative, creative person that process and engagement with the process, I think, most important thing, because I couldn't imagine what will come as a result, right? So I was trying to engage myself with the process of making every day, and I think one of my early ideas was, because Billy Graham, he is in his real life in American small place called England, was optometrist. He, at some point, he married a very rich girl, and he became, sort of like a part of this big family that was running optometrist places, retail places, and this is why I kind of started to think about treatment of color to have something to do with optical, these tablets, doctors ask you to read from bigger letters to small letters. And then I was thinking about model of eye and Billy looking into these optical instruments, and definitely Billy laying somewhere in a forest around Dresden, close to Dresden, and Billy on a planet. And then I was thinking about layers of wars and reality, sort of like a slicing the earth down to all this. And some of the early sketches were kind of dealing with moments, and I also was trying to play on this balance between moments in the book and some metaphoric images that I will be able maybe to create based on what's written. And I can tell you that was challenging, because Kurt Vonnegut is a master of metaphor, and it's already implied, it's already in the text. So, and I didn't want to illustrate his metaphors, but I had to create almost mine. And all in all, I'm going to think about role of illustrator with book almost like a, let's say, theater director who is staging famous play. Like, let's say, if somebody, if you look at every production of Richard III by Shakespeare, they all will be different, right? And you can read these books of Slaughterhouse. There could be a million different concepts, a million different products. And it's a question, if you can make it yours and tell something that not to be too far from the story, but at the same time to be hopefully somewhat unique. And great experience. And then by the time I kind of created this kind of early set of sketches, and it was already January, early February of 2022, Russia entered Ukraine. So if you remember that first images of Dresden, so a lot of areas in Ukraine started to look as film and documentary. You know, this is Kharkiv train station, second day of the war. This is maternity ward in Zaporozhye. So all this stuff, and because this is basically the book that is anti-war in the sentiment, and when you illustrate things like that, when you engage with something like that, you feel like this might help to make our world free of wars, free of this tragedy, and basically at those days. I kind of lost interest in anything because everything I was drawing started to feel bleak and work. So and I couldn't really make a lot of sense, right? Because I found myself in this hole called "People Never Learn from that mistake," and that was and I'm like I said, I'm not complaining about me because I'm really comfortable life here in the States, but also kind of I started to kind of engage with this whole Ukrainian war, Russian aggression, because Ukraine is not like a dot on the map for me because I went to Ukrainian art and design academy, art there. So it was hard. So what I started to do as a sort of like to keep, because project is project, and I promised, I signed contract, and I had to deliver. So I had something in my professional practice. I call it, I mean everybody call it automatic drawing, where you read something, you're not going through a very hard kind of process of making idea, sketch, very kind of diligent, and I just had to kind of draw and draw and draw, read a little bit, and just put myself in that book and find something that would kind of replicate certain moments, certain ideas in the book. So that was kind of my second attempt to get things into sort of like a way where things were promising to become real illustration. So this idea came again from this moment in the book where a German photographer or filmmaker was invited to make a film about how Billy and a few of his friends were captured, but it was all staged. So basically they asked Billy and his friends to play the role of these captured American soldiers. And that's funny and grotesque and very tragic, actually. So I kind of started to kind of fantasize about it. And then I started to draw Billy and his friends first. And then I thought, what if only Billy? And this is how Transformadorians see him, because they see, figure and person as multiple images on the snow. And so I kind of started to do that. And then, basically my brain's kind of changed a little bit of my concept started to change because it was harder for me to deal with death on every page. I started to think about time travel concept. And for me, instead of going like straightforward with premises of the book where Billy actually traveling through the space and time, I kind of started to imagine what if it's all in his mind. And he was actually taken to a psychiatric ward, spent a lot of times in psychiatric clinic. And I kind of started to imagine his wife visiting him, and in the book it says that he was always putting his sheets on the top, and nobody knows what was happening inside. And what was happening inside, I was thinking maybe that's what he travels inside of his brain. And then I kind of, all the multiple images kind of were happening. I started to imagine how this killing machines are flying above the city, and how CD trying to protect itself. And I started to imagine, the book is also, again, I'm very, I'm kind of taking on many different aspects of the book, but this book is written this way because it's always, kind of changing time and place, and it's very jumpy. So I feel like it may be all right for that type of writing. So I started to imagine, remember my little sketch where I started to imagine these layers of human development and wars and things. And in the beginning of work, Kurt Vonnegut himself, first chapter about Kurt Vonnegut going to GDR, German Democratic Republic. He receives a grant from American University, and he going to Dresden. And Dresden at the time, because he was leveled, Dresden at the time became Soviet type kind of development. Maybe not as bad as I drew, but I wanted to just go full speed to that one, because I grew up in this kind of new development in former Soviet Union. So I kind of started to place that level CD on the bottom. And again, some ideas were coming and going, and then I started to kind of literally going after, kind of chapter after chapter. There's 10 chapters in the book, and I started to kind of engage myself more and more with the idea of documentary, film-like sequential narrative, because I realized at some point that it's really hard to put every moment in the book in one single image. And I started to play and make like a mini concept, mini narratives for each chapter, where basically the viewer will open one page, then turn it, and the part of this illustration will be on the other side. So there's an interesting moment in the book where he was instead in his when he was captured, he saw one of the German, and by the way, this is the end of the World War II, and very low moral within German army, very bad uniform. So basically one of the officers who was capturing Billy, he was wearing Hungarian traditional boots. They were very beautiful, and Billy, because he's like not soldier at all. He's poetic and a crazy guy. He saw Adam and Eve in this intricate pattern on the boots. So I made this deal, that second illustration, which goes in book on the back of that, I called Garden of Eden, and nothing like that says in the book. I just made it as a continuation of that, and sort of like thinking about where we're going as humankind, and where the war is really killing everything human in all age. And then definitely transformer door. I had to kind of establish some kind of visuals for this world. And by the way, I started, at that time, I kind of started to use a little bit of collage technique, and I was using a little bit of elements from photography and things I found, and I was redrawing them to fit into particular style I wanted to see. I started to kind of draw a lot of Billy Pilgrim, and I wanted to make face that doesn't have like a lot of particular features, like very common, very guy. And then I created this whole series of portraits of Billy in different stages of his life, but he looks the same. And basically, it's funny that Kurt Vonnegut, when he, definitely when he goes to the war, he's very young, and then in his office in 50s, beginning of 60s, he's already much older. But people who kind of having communicating with Billy in earlier stages of his life, they mentioning that he looks a little too old for his age, and people in later stages of his life saying opposite, that he looks too young. So I decided to go. So there's a Billy in looking through the window in Clark when he was captured, Billy optometrist, Billy in the psychiatric ward, Billy in the casket. So it's the same Billy but in different position in the book. And at the same time with these early images with development, I started seriously thinking about exterior design for the book and design for the book. And remember I mentioned this idea of New Testament. It kind of, some ideas from different concepts kind of I found kind of somehow slipped into the final art. And I started to think about what if still, this cross actually, it's a big thing for Christianity, important symbol, but it's also marking on all, on a lot of German tanks and airplanes. So I decided to make it like a big symbol, and basically that was also like a grid for the whole entire project. And my illustration and text placement, everything was kind of set into this stone grid. And inside of this German cross, say we see, I think, this American airplane, which also looks like cross. What if we see that through? And that would kind of have some kind of weird logic, because this whole war started because of German fascism, and then at some point American and British airplanes were bombing Dresden, other cities, so it's kind of mixing it all together, and for good or for bad. So, and started to look on inside pages and how this is, by the way, Kurt Vonnegut in Dresden illustration for first chapter, and this is that. So now we kind of getting into final art, and we can go further and further. So this is end papers. I call it the photo shoot, and because the whole visual language talks about filming documentaries that Bill Pilgrim was watching backwards and from the beginning to the end all the time through the book. So I thought that would be good opening for the book. And then this is title page and Billy as a Cinderella. And there's an interesting moment in the book where British prisoners of war staging Cinderella play for Americans who just arrived. And Billy was hysterically laughing at the performance, and he couldn't stop. They take him to the medical facility, how you call it, in that camp. And then when he returns, he found, Billy never got a normal uniform in the army. So, and he didn't have boots, so he found these silvery boots on the stage and drapes from the play and curtain and put it on himself. And I also gave him a plunger, because plunger actually in the book plays an important role, because Kurt Vonnegut creates very distinctive sort of like a description of this South Pomodorians as they look like plunger with hands and a tongue. So, and then suddenly I said, is that Statue of Freedom? Somehow, and then differently this Slaughterhouse theme playing an important role. So we can go through chapters. Chapter 1 is basically intro to the book, talks about Kurt Vonnegut going to Dresden and what he finds there, and I'm setting up everything in the early 60s. And then chapter 2, this is sort of like a divider, and this is first moment where Billy got stuck in time. So he was somewhere in Dresden moment before he was captured, and this lonely place where everybody was killed, and at the same time, in the same pages of the book, he sits in his office with his client lady, and she sees that he's just got bleak and sleeping, and that was sort of how he was traveling in time. He was sitting in a forest, German forest, and kind of daydreaming, and at the same time he was alone. So these illustrations in the book, they happen back to back, and that we, the idea of using a transparent film, wherever it didn't came out well, and then between these moments, I started to kind of superimpose this kind of actual pieces of film where these two moments finding each other on the film. So that basically, this is a spread between those two illustrations. And also, kind of putting some kind of phrase, some kind of quote from Kurt Vonnegut. So creating this kind of experience for a reader. Chapter 3, where this moment of capture with Adam and Eve, and in between I made this piece because he was also seeing Billy in that before he was captured. He saw a beautiful German boy, and he was beautiful as Eve, and that kind of. If you think about all the wars they fought by very young, basically kids, and why this book actually called Children Crusades. And this is a scenery where Billy is traveling to his destination with a group of other prisoners. They're hungry, the train car is overloaded, and through that little window he sees Germans eating spaghetti. And spaghetti also kind of metaphor that Kurt Vonnegut uses in the book, because he's saying that as Pomodorian they see stars and the whole universe as spaghetti. And that's spaghetti because they don't see this concept of time, they see basically everything once, all the images. And here I was playing with, one thing I can tell you, Kurt Vonnegut is there and I'm here. But one critical note on authors, he gave the description of Charles Pomodorians so straightforward, and I was trying so many different things, but it just couldn't, because he just said it's plunger with hand and eye in the middle. So what you can do as an illustrator, I was trying different things, make it transparent out of these spaghetti things. I thought it's too cartoony, and then I decided, what if I make it plunger hand and eye, and that's it. I didn't include it as a main illustration, but just made it for divider. Just a little. This kind of came interesting because on the way traveled to Dresden, because the car was overcrowded, Billy kind of tied himself to the crossbar. And because religious sort of sentiment is part of the book, I thought like the moment where Billy Ford's transformadorian is taking Billy up to this ship, and this piece called Portholes, the light from portholes, and this Billy on the cross, almost like Jesus. I thought it would be a good pair to coincide in the book. And between those two images, at the same time, the narrative goes on. It's already night where Dresden was destroyed, and I'm showing this my illustration, but just taking into smaller scale and showing this as a part of the narrative. And then Billy got sick, and he's in a medical ward in the camp, and this is that I decided to capture these moments where British soldiers made a beautiful, as it could be beautiful in a captivity evening for Americans. They staged the parade and they made a beautiful dinner, supper with candles and all these things. And that's the moment where Billy became Cinderella. And this is barracks and things I kind of superimposed over small American city with this optical business that Billy had, and made this prisoners camp. Valencia and Montana. Valencia was Billy's wife, and she was visiting him pretty often. But she usually just eating bars and reading the Bible. And Montana was a superstar, movie star that is kind of taken into the planet to be with Billy. So we can go quickly through images. I wanted to. We have very little time left, so this is sort of like night of Dresden bombing when Billy comes out from the slaughterhouse, which was happily had this kind of basement where all the frozen meat was collected. So here came, and this is Billy and Montana on the planet. And we're coming to the end. This is sort of like last image in the book, looking at the future, where we see nothing. And this is pretty much it, except I have to tell a really short story. This is a little bit educational, please. So usually it's an unwritten kind of thing in book illustration design, where people saying that good book comes where world of author, world of the story, and world of the artist, they kind of finding each other. And I want to tell you a little story, because I was once a Billy Pilgrim in Soviet Army for 2 years. I was drafted when I was 19. And I was in a former German territory. Now it's called Kaliningrad. I don't know if you heard of it. It basically was part of Poland. It was part of Germany some time ago. And then after World War II, it was given to Stalin as maybe a little enclave, but it was connected to Baltic states. But now it's not. And so now it's a lot of conversation going, should we take it back for Germany or for Poland? So, and what you see here, it's a pretty recent photographs of bags where I was basically smoking cigarettes, and this is checkpoints where we always see them. So you can almost see little Igor at 19 years old kind of working this way. But most important thing, and this is how this territory looked with Soviets. But school, the whole barracks were built by Germans, and there was a tank school. And what's interesting, Russians, Soviets, they bombed the hell out of this whole place, including Kaliningrad, city of Kaliningrad, German city of Kaliningrad, that was absolutely level as Dresden. But they never bombed the tank school, any military kind of things. But this is this little place we were placed in. Right now it's called it's small village corner, and I didn't see anything there. There was like a little farm, buildings, farms, but before the war it was small but pretty prosperous town, Zinta. And now the Zinta was leveled, and basically when I was there serving my time for 2 years, everything you can see only this ruins. And it's still there, and nobody never, this is streets of Zinken, and this is roads I was walking. And this is why this idea of, and this is some pages from my little journal I did at that time for my friend who was from Lithuania. It's called Pictures from Cornell. And this is me sitting on that inside that very checkpoint, looking out, and I drew myself drawing that picture. And I was kind of, it was beautiful trees, and all the roads were built by Germans, and everything where we see just ruins, and we see like a little, unfortunately from that work that was done like in 1979, I have only bad photographs of that, not much, but I was kind of capturing some of the experiences being in this. So this is also that road next to our barrack, and this is how we were trying to kind of sleep our time in. We were basically asking one soldier to lock us from outside, so nobody knew where we are. We were just drinking tea and kind of sitting quietly in a, that building had like really interesting basement, and nobody would bother us. And this is a little image I did maybe a little later, but also damaged from that experience. We had like in 1981, there was like huge military games that Soviet Union was almost collapsed, but it's still alive. They decided to put like big war games to show NATO countries how mighty we are, and we were going there on our anti-tank vehicles. I was a gunner at that point. So all these memories kind of brought me in some kind of thinking, and maybe you're part of this whole experience. So I'm pretty much done. If you have any questions, please